Here we go. We've got this. Potentially. Take 4 billion. Hello and welcome to Where Creatives Connect. This is the final podcast of season 1, which feels really bizarre. I've done 10 podcasts, 7 wonderful guests, a couple of solo podcasts, but this is going to be the podcast that wraps up season 1, mainly because I'm very, very excited to get onto season 2. As I film this right now at about 1 a.m, I have already shot and edited most of season 2 together. I travelled to Dubai and New Zealand. I'm super excited to get it onto your screens, and that will be happening very, very soon. If you've not watched anything so far, don't stress. This will probably give you a nice overview of what it's all about, and then you can dive into season 1 and do some good catching up. Where Creatives Connect is really about bringing you creative people from lots of different walks of life, musicians, actors, directors, and everything in between, and looks into their lives, looks into who they are as people, finds some common denominators or common ground, and brings to the surface a lot of the ideologies and the thinking behind what they actually do, instead of just the finished shiny product that you either listen to or you see on the screen. I've had genuinely such a wonderful time shooting this so far, and I thought it's really important to reflect as I go along, because I imagine my thought processes and my experiences will change as, you know, life happens, I suppose. And I'm going to shoot this podcast in 2 separate bits. The first part is going to be 3 key things that I have learnt in the process so far, or that I've been contemplating. And the second half is 5 key moments that were my favourite moments from my guests that have been here. So let's dive straight into it. The first thing I'm going to talk about is something called acting on your third instinct. And it's a fairly common exercise within the theatre and drama world, and I suppose in the music world as well. I've heard it in lots of different contexts, but I've tried to use it really heavily within my interviewing process to coax out more, I suppose, to coax out deeper thoughts or thoughts that are harder to get to within my guests. From the word go, I was really quite anxious about being a good interviewer. I've never done it before, and I didn't want to be somebody that cuts off their flow or doesn't properly listen to what they're saying or gets the wrong end of the stick or just doesn't make the guest feel comfortable in their own skin to be exactly who they are. I've been really kind of paying attention to how other people interview and seeing what I like and don't like about it and trying to implement that myself. One of them is this thing. I'll explain it in terms of acting, and then I'll explain it in terms of music, and then I'll explain it in terms of podcasting. So within theatre, if you were exchanging dialogue or trialogue, I suppose, and somebody was asking you a question or saying a statement to you that required you to react in a way that was less surface level, it was a little bit more thoughtful. Quite often, if you just react straight away, your first instinct, it's not going to hold much gravitas. It's going to be fairly, like, generic, and it just bounces on. Might keep the pace up all right, but it doesn't really do anything. The second instinct is normally a bit awkward, a bit clumsy, and then the third one is normally enough time for it to seem like what they have said has actually sunk in. You've processed it and you've formulated what you need to say. Now, it's not always 3, but it's rarely 1 or 2, if that makes sense. I'll give you a musical example, if my headphones work. This can work in terms of really well if you were doing a cadenza in music. Or actually, let's take a chord progression. Let's just do a 2-5-1 chord progression. I want you to listen out for the last chord. I'm going to play it on my first instinct, okay? So fine. Yeah, does what you think. Acting on my second instinct. It's okay. It's just like a bit placed, but not like a caring placed. It's like you've just plonked it down after a long day at work where you don't really care about what you're placing down. Here's a third instinct. And just that extra bit of delay gives it more weighting. Like, not waiting. I suppose you are waiting for it, but I mean waiting as in it gives it more weight, if that makes any sense. Let me come back. Is that okay? I don't know. That's a theatrical example and a musical example. But in terms of actually podcasting and interviewing somebody, quite often, if you wait just that little bit longer, they probably are going to follow up what they've just said with something extra. Maybe it's something that they've just thought of that they can bring to it, or maybe they've just dug deeper into themselves. And I find that a really useful tool. You can use it in your actual life. Maybe if you want to get better at listening to your partner or to your friends, or listening to a student that you teach or something, waiting for your third instinct to react is normally, well, I found it to be a very useful thing. Number 2, the importance of asking the questions you actually want to ask. I reckon between the age of about 13 and 25, I asked maybe 5% of the questions that I actually wanted to know the answers to. And I think that came from 2 things. Firstly, I think it came from being fairly successful at school and things. When you're young, you get a lot of praise, and sometimes I think that I was scared to ask questions because it would seem like I didn't know what I was doing, or I was worried that I'd ask a question to something that I should already know the answer to. I think I was fairly quiet a lot of the time, but yeah, it's a real shame to look back on. And some of the best teachers or mentors of people are people that either make you feel A, comfortable enough to be able to ask you questions and not feel stupid, or B, question the student well enough to actually coax out the holes in their knowledge, kind of thing. But the other reason I didn't ask questions that much when I was younger, I think I used to be scared that people would think I was really weird for asking those questions, which maybe they do think that, but I just don't care about that anymore. And it feels so good when you actually ask the questions you want to know the answer to. I've been sat at that table behind me, been really nervous to ask a couple of the questions, because particularly the ones that are a bit closer to the bone, you know, they can be really personal things to do with family, to do with income, to do with work-life balance, to do with, how to be successful. Even people get funky about that, like, what do you put your success down to? And people are like, oh no, there's secrets or there's whatever. Luckily, I've not had any pushback on any of these things that I've actually leaned into. But when I actually ask those questions, man, it feels so much better. So that's a really interesting one. I will say though, sometimes the way in which you ask the question is 10 times more important than the actual question itself. I'll give you an example. Sometimes when I tell people I do a podcast, people ask me why I do it. And if somebody were to ask me, I say, I do a podcast, and they go, oh, why do you do that? It's got that weird negative intention behind it, and you feel defensive. And I'll probably come back and say, well, because I think it's cool, and shut up. I don't know. I would just get really angry. Well, maybe not really angry, but I wouldn't give a particularly open, fluid answer to the question. Whereas if somebody, I say, I do a podcast, and somebody said, oh, that's interesting. Why did you start that? In an interested way, that intention is so much more warm, and my jaw just clicked. I wonder if I can hear that on the mic. Interesting. It's so much more warm and encompassing of what you're doing before you even given the answer. So be aware of how you're asking questions, not just the questions that you're asking. Third and final thing, before I go on to my favourite parts of my guests, or the favourite moments with my guests, is how I conclude my podcast. It looks a little bit like this. Wherever you are in the world, out of the 9 countries that have listened so far, remember to create with people, connect with people, but by far most importantly, be exactly you. Because if you're not going to be you, nobody else is going to do it for you. Until the next time, peace. And use Jamie 10 at checkout. Get your dingbats, notebooks, pens, backpacks now. I'm going to focus on the last bit, which is be exactly you. And this is a phrase that I have thought about honestly for most of my life. I think I figured out the other day where I first heard it. I believe it was first said to me just before I was about to walk on stage as a 13-year-old boy at the National Theatre in London on the Olivier stage. And it was for a production called It Snows, and the opening visual was I walked down the steps of the centre of the auditorium in a straitjacket. I played a character called the Weird Boy, and the house lights were still up and audience was still kind of sitting down, and I really slowly walked towards the stage in a straitjacket, which must have been pretty unnerving. But just before I got round there, my director John Lonsdale shout out to John, had walked me round to the top of the stairs to make sure that I was actually going to get there okay. I was 13 and quite scared. And just before he took me round, we had a director from the National would do some workshops and give us some encouragement before we went and performed it. And I can't remember their name for the life of me, but he leaned over to me, clearly looking very nervous as a young boy would be, and said, just enjoy every moment out there and be exactly you. And it really stuck in my mind, mainly because it was such a massive moment, but it really stuck in my mind because I didn't understand it. Be exactly me. You always hear that phrase, particularly, like at awkward social gatherings when people are like, oh, just be yourself, enjoy yourself. Well, that's great, but what if being myself is not enjoying myself in this weird, awkward family gathering or whatever it may be? And be exactly you is so specific to, don't be a version of yourself that fits into a box that your boss is going to like, or that a certain friend is going to appreciate, or that would please your parents, or please your, anyone. Figure out exactly who you are, lean into that, and then the people that like that will be around you and they will come to you. But if you're always trying to fake being different versions of yourself all the time, you never actually know what you think about things, and you often find yourself really frustrated and you don't know why. Now, I'm saying all this with a pinch of salt because I understand, you've got to conform. We live on planet Earth in 2023. We have to conform to things, like stand in queues. God, I hate queues. You've got to turn up to your job on time, depending on what your job is, I suppose. You've got to pay your bills and all these things. I understand all of that stuff, but if you don't know exactly who you are, it's also an ever-changing thing, so it's a constant journey. But leaning into exactly who you are is so, so important. And that's why it's my little mantra at the end of the podcast, because not enough people know who they are, let alone can try and exist just as they are. And if I can change or start to encourage, a handful of people to even think about it, then I will be a happy man. And I actually picked up a very close friend of mine saying it back to me on a text the other day, and that made me really, really happy, because other than that person at the National all those years ago saying it to me, I don't think I've heard anybody else say it. I don't think. Anyway, start saying it, start doing it. It's flipping great. Okay, reflective moment over. These are 5 of my favourite moments with my guests. Number 1 is a hilarious moment that I'd completely forgotten about. When I was interviewing Josh Savage, it was actually the very first podcast that I ever did, and I put him a bit later on in the order just to balance things out. This thing, my lovely Dingbats notebook, I use as a guest book, and every guest takes a Polaroid with me and writes in a question to a future guest, a bit like Stephen Bartlett, The Diary of a CEO. Wonderful stuff. Anyway, Josh being the first one, nobody had written any questions in. I had asked a bunch of people at rehearsals and gigs and things to come up with ideas, and I just didn't write them down. So there's this wonderful moment where I pick up my book and I open it and I stare at the page and I try and pretend that there's something on my page, and I just lose it laughing because there's just nothing there. I just find it awfully funny. This is the clip. In 5 years' time, do you think you will have changed pathways, or do you think you will have just grown? What? No, that's literally. I'm making this up.
Rumble.
Oh gosh. What shall I ask you?
That's a good question.
Okay.
If you want. Yeah, that's good.
Was it convincing?
It was reasonably convincing.
Thank you.
I thought you weren't really scanning that much, but no, it looked reasonable.
I'm just gonna. Oh no, I'm gonna have to do the whole thing. But as you're in the early stages of our interviews, I've got some people a bit like our fish soup lip. No,
other way. You got it. You got it.
Fish loops. Oh,
fish. Take 9.
We're so close. To finish off the podcast, a closing tradition that I've stolen directly from Stephen Bartlett.
No, you don't think about it too much.
Okay.
Don't think about it.
I'm just going to cut to me asking you a question.
Yeah.
Nice one, Jamie. Good. My second favourite moment is in the first podcast I released with Andy Scott. I had compiled a bunch of videos from mutual friends or people that he had worked with, basically them reflecting on how much they appreciate Andy for all the work he does and just who he is as a human being. And seeing all of these videos come back, well, firstly, me reaching out to these people and then them coming straight back with these videos, and more came after the podcast as well. I literally have a bunch on my hard drive somewhere of wonderful, loving videos from people. And just the act of actually putting that together just was wonderful, because we don't do enough of it. We don't tell each other that we love each other. We don't tell each other how much we appreciate each other, how much we appreciate the work, the time, the energy. And often it takes a really seismic shift in something like, someone's got really ill or someone moves country, for example. And that's when these nice comments come out. But that felt really good. Here it is.
Also, I want to focus on the looking forward. This is very unexpected. I'm going to have to try and hold it together.
Well, maybe it'll make for better viewing if you don't. I've got in touch with a few people that you've either taught, worked with, played with over the years, and they have some messages for you.
Hi Andy, just leaving you a quick message to say thanks for all of the opportunities and chances that I've had because of you, to play with you, to work with you, and to be involved in projects that you're working in, and to have you as somebody who's been a real role model, going through school, and then even like professionally as somebody who is doing the music thing, and that's been really inspiring to me over the years. So thanks for all of that, and catch you soon.
Hi, my name's Rob Buckland. I've known Andy for, 37 years now. We first met as went behind the ears 18-year-old, 19-year-old students at the Royal Northern College of Music. I was playing clarinet and saxophone, he was playing bassoon and saxophone at the time. And we started working together almost immediately. I remember him vividly at the time telling me that he had a clear vision in his life that what he wanted to be was a composer and a saxophone player. His model, his idol at the time, I think one of his many idols at the time was Bob Mintzer, a great friend of ours now, incredible tenor player, known of course to everybody in the jazz and broader musical world. And I remember thinking, crikey, how do you know that? I want to be a composer and a saxophone player. I want to run projects that feature my music. Here we are 37 years later. And crikey, look at the body of work that Andy has created, generated. And I think the thing that rings truest all the way through to me is that single-minded self-belief that he only wants to do his music his way. He plays the music he wants to play, he plays in musical situations that he creates, that he wants to be part of. He's not interested in expending energy in just conforming to musical norms, playing in more traditional music situations just as a sideman. He wants to do his thing with his sound in his playing, in his writing. And that's why we're here 37 years later with this incredible body of highly distinctive work. Whether you hear one note of him playing, be it in a quartet, we shared the stage with him for all of those years in the Apollo Quartet, of course. Whether you hear it in his chamber writing, his symphonic writing, his orchestral writing, one bar of music, you know it's Andy Scott. And I think that's such an inspirational legacy to have been, to witness and to have been, to have collaborated with in some of those projects. I've been part of those incredible projects, working in Group S, formerly Sax Assault, the incredible double saxophone concerto, Dark Rain, that Andy penned for John Hall and myself, that we've played all over the world and recorded. Countless solo pieces, duo pieces that I've recorded on my albums and performed everywhere. It's difficult to imagine a world that hasn't been so incredibly influenced by his music. It's been a pleasure and a privilege, and here's to the next 37 years. Crikey, there's a thought. Nice one, matey.
Wow.
Hi Andy, I just wanted to give you a massive thank you for everything you've helped me with and done with me over the past couple of years. I wouldn't be here studying at Leeds if it wasn't for you sparking my passion for jazz, helping my improvisation massively, and just getting me into the rabbit hole of all the cool theory. I just wanted to give you a big thank you for all of that, all the compositions you've done and all the support you've given me over the years. Thank you very much, Andy.
G'day Andy, how are ya? Thank you so much for everything that you do for the saxophone community. You're the most genuine person that I know, such an amazing human, and thank you so much for being a great friend, and I hope to see you in Australia real soon.
Andy Scott is an incredible musician who quite simply makes things happen in the musical world, and the musical community is a much better place for having Andy Scott at the heart of it. For example, he might compose an enormous work in the contemporary classical vein for an enormous ensemble, or he might be freely improvising or playing in an Afro-Cuban band. He's a source of inspiration, in short, for so many different kinds of musicians. And something that I love about Andy and that really inspires me is that he draws so much inspiration from so many different kinds of music. Thanks, Andy, for all your incredible work.
Hello, Andy. Sorry about the mafia-style voice. Just wanted to say a massive thank you to you for everything you've done for me. You have quite literally shaped me into the person I am today. The advice and education and the role model you've been for me has quite literally changed the person that I am, and hugely for the better. Thank you so much.
Hi Andy, I've known you for a while now, and from the beginning of being at juniors and having lessons with you all the way through to now post-college working with you, writing and collaborating, you've always been so kind and supportive and encouraging, and it's just a pleasure to know you, and thank you so much for everything that you do for me and for the music community and for everyone that you work with.
Dear A, hope to find you well, and I hope this video arrives in time. I think there's an homage being made to you, and it's a pleasure to be part of it. And just to say that I remember with a lot of emotion our interpretation of Dark Rain in Palmela. It was an highlight for me, and that's it. Hope to see you soon, and I still think that it really would be very cool to have you as a neighbor here in south of Aveiro. And that's it. This week I'm making orchestral music, a piece by Einer Goebbels, and I'm playing the saxophones and the bass clarinet, so challenge, and I got a little bit lost in time, but I hope this arrives good for you. A huge egg, my friend.
It's been my really good fortune to know, to work with and have Andy as a friend for the past 25 years. As a composer, arranger, performer and teacher, Andy has a wonderful gift of taking the smallest of concepts and ideas and creating something quite amazing.
a great saxophonist, brilliant composer, fairly average bassoonist, but more importantly, just a lovely person. Many thanks, Andy, and here's to many more years. Cheers.
Wow, blimey. I'm absolutely gobsmacked. Yeah, that's very kind of all of those people, and for you for taking the trouble to do this.
You're very welcome. It's something we don't often do when life is so busy, and to stop and actually acknowledge what it is that you do is appreciated by so many. So thank you
so much. Yeah, I'm kind of lost for words.
Here is my third favourite clip, and it is with my wonderful friend Caitlin talking about how failure is a gift.
Failure is a gift to be used. Try to see the failure as just the stepping stone to getting better, because otherwise you, like I say, quit then, because there's no other alternative but to keep going forward. Failure isn't really failure, it's just moving you in a different direction.
Fourth one is not a specific clip, but it was moments that I had both with Marley and with Ashley. Both fairly new friends to me, but we have a lot of mutual friends that we've worked with considerably more. And my favourite part of it was that it was so nice to hear somebody else complimenting a friend that we both have, or somebody that we both know, away from them. It's so common and so easy, particularly in performing arts. You're on a gig and you're like, oh, did you see what so-and-so posted the other day? And it's like a little bit of backstabbing, a little bit of lack of warmth towards people, but it was just so lovely to sit down. And half of it wasn't even on the podcast. It was like having a cup of tea afterwards. It was actually mushroom coffee afterwards, because that's my favourite thing. And yeah, so for example, one of them was Ashley was talking about Matt Abrams, who is somebody I went to junior RNCM with. He was a wonderful trumpet player, musician, and now he's a fantastic MD. And Ashley was talking about all the different projects he's worked on with him. And it was just great. It was just really lovely. And I think the moment with Marley was when the Untold Orchestra, run by Sam Davies and Josh Poole and Tom Fripp, loads of those guys have a lot to do with it. They had orchestrated and arranged a load of Marley's music a couple of years back, and she was just in love with the idea of an orchestra playing that, and it was just so wonderful to hear, because I remember Sam doing one of the first gigs when it was called, it had a different name, back at Music College. So it's just so wonderful to see how far people have come, and then people saying nice things about him. It's really, really nice. The fifth and last moment that was my favourite was in David Innes Edwards' podcast, and it was right at the end of his podcast, and I chopped it out and put it at the beginning as well as the end, and his camera had actually died, so I couldn't even put it on his face, but I put all the text up as well. You know what, I'll just play it. Here it is.
I used to define myself as a director. I realise in my head that's what I was. And then more recently I've realised that just a bloke who goes out and walks his dog and occasionally goes and does bits of television or filming. And it's important, it's a small statement, but it's a very important difference, that I'm not, it's what you define yourself as. And I think it's dangerous to define yourself as what your career is, and not be just yourself.
Now, David would never admit this because he is such a humble man, but he is an absolute world-class director. The body of work that he's got behind him, and the fact that he's still creating and directing and producing now as well, is phenomenal. But the fact that he had the realisation and the human within him to say that he is a man that walks his dog and sometimes directs films and TV, just brought everything into a new light for me. It's so easy, particularly being young and keen as anything to do well. It's all this career-focused thing, and it's like, who do you know? What have you done? What's your CV look like? What are the cool things you're doing? And it's go, and it's all that energy up here. But actually just to go, okay, beneath all of that, there is a human being, and who is that human being? And then what does that human being sometimes do? And I just loved that. And I suppose, really, and I'm just looking down at my book, that actually comes back to be exactly you and know exactly who you are. So that was a really beautiful moment. And I didn't actually pick up quite how profound it was in the interview because I was so nervous about getting it right. And I knew the camera had died. I was all stressed. But I remember sitting exactly here, editing away, and I went, oh my gosh, that is so profound. And it's also so obvious, but nobody says it. So David, I really thank you for saying that. It taught me a lot. I still think about it a lot now. Wow. Perhaps it's because I'm shooting in the middle of the night. Perhaps it's because I'm really, really tired. But that was quite reflective. I hope you've found some lovely little gems in there that you can think about or learn from. I'm learning so much. It's genuinely, I think this is properly the best move I've done in my life starting this podcast. I've had more wonderful reactions and interactions with people than anything I've ever done. Ever. And half of this, it's not really me. I'm just providing the space. Like, that's it. Plus lots of editing. But yeah, here we are. Now, season 2. Dude, I am so excited. Like, I'm actually so excited. It's been lovely being in my studio here, sat all hours of the night putting this together. But I packed up my bag. I went to Dubai, I went to New Zealand, and I just met some brilliant people. And I can't wait for you to meet them because it's so exciting. I'm not going to blab on about it. Anyway, my first guest is an amazing human. He's called Dante Kennedy, and he is the musical director of Q's Bar in the Versace Hotel in Dubai. A phenomenal drummer, a phenomenal musician and MD. And he inspires me with his work ethic, with his attitude to life. I can't wait for you to see it. Talking about work ethic, actually, just to give you a little idea. You might have seen this on my Instagram story, I don't know, but if not, it was bonkers. It was bonkers how it happened. I met Dante 5 years ago, something like that, after I was on tour and gigging at the Opera House in Dubai with Hacienda Classical for 3 or 4 nights, something like that. And I went to Q's Bar and I met him that night, and we've stayed in touch ever since. I so happened to have a 14-hour layover in Dubai. Yes, woohoo. And I got out of the airport, popped over to Q's, watched the last 2 sets of their gig. That finished, which was phenomenal. I'll put some clips here in a second. Finished up about 1 a.m. and met some cool people. And then we set up and we started going. And I think we wrapped up about 3:30. Actually, he wrote it down. On the stage at Q's, we wrapped up at 11 minutes past 3 in the morning. And we probably stayed talking until about 4 a.m. Then I went back to the airport and cracked on with my travels. But that moment's very, very special to me. But that work ethic to just be like, yeah, of course I'll stay up. Of course I'll do a podcast with you after absolutely smashing a 3-set gig. Unbelievable. Anyway, he's guest 1, and then I crack on to New Zealand. So phenomenal stuff. I can't wait to bring it to you. If you're still listening, thank you so much. If you've listened to any, some, or all of season 1, thank you so much. This genuinely is like such a massive part of my life, and it is going to only grow from here. Wherever you are in the world and whatever you're doing, please remember to create with people, connect with people, but most importantly, as I've blabbed on about a lot in this podcast, be exactly you. See you in season 2.